Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here. Welcome to ZooBox. Today we're going to be talking about the 2022 film, the recently released HELLRAISER.
Beautiful, isn't it?
It's really nice.
You can hold it.
What is it?
It's a puzzle. And it's almost finished. Keep going.
So if I solve it, do I get a prize?
I do.
The film is directed by David Bruckner, written by Ben Collins, Luke Piotrowski, and David S. Goyer. Has a story credit based on, obviously, Clive Barker's The Hellbound Heart, also his own film from 1987, HELLRAISER. It stars Odessa A'zion, Jamie Clayton, Drew Starkey, Jason Lyles, Brandon Flynn, Goran Visnik, and others. The logline plot synopsis is a take on Clive Barker's 1987 horror classic where a young woman struggling with addiction comes into possession of an ancient puzzle box, unaware that its purpose is to summon the Cenobites.
It's time. Greater delights await. We wish to see you proceed. Feed it. Their blood, their pain, all for us. What is it you pray for?
So yeah, HELLRAISER 2022. I was actually kind of looking forward to this. In the landscape that we have nowadays, especially with streaming and stuff, they often don't show you very much about a movie or its production or anything related to it until, maybe a few weeks, maybe a month at most out. So there was really not much information. Like, I knew that this movie was being made. I'm not a huge fan of the franchise. I really love the original HELLRAISER. It's one of my favorite horror movies of the era. I think it's probably Clive Barker's best movie, like his most coherent movie, because it's so simple. And it gets down, because Clive Barker likes to kind of explore the human condition, our inclination for the darker side of things and our own degenerate qualities as people, or the potential, that we all have that kind of potential. And he does it in the original HELLRAISER, where he really kind of intelligently crafts a story that's just about a family. That's about this infecting a family, kind of this middle-class, suburban family. And watching it kind of tear everything apart. And it has, a great villain in Uncle Frank, who's a real creepy motherfucker. He's a creepy motherfucker before he becomes, more of a monster, etc. Before he comes into contact with the puzzle box, he's already just a gross motherfucker. He's this guy that's going to the farthest reaches for what he calls sensual experience. He wants that full sensory things. He doesn't think that normal life provides him enough, and he's experienced everything, he's done everything. He wants to take himself to the edge. He wants to go further than what normal man can. And that's when you reveal the Cenobites. The Cenobites they're a part of it, and they kind of add that spooky, creepy monster vibe to the movies, but they're not really, dare I say, the heart of the movies. I think that they are kind of, they're window dressing. They're very attractive, very interesting, very provocative window dressing on a story that you could actually have a version of this story, maybe without them, and it would still work pretty well. Granted, you'd have to change some things around or whatnot, but I think the core is really about the idea of this kind of stuff infecting kind of a family unit and what that does and what that means for people and society, etc. It's a slight movie in a certain respect. It's a tight 90 minutes, I think, but from top to bottom, from the production design to the score, it has an amazing score, the aesthetic of it. I really just love that movie. And it's a movie that stays with you and really gets under my skin.
Jesus wept.
No pun intended. And it's just filled with great character actors, and it's one of the best of its time. As the series went on, it kind of lost itself. I mean, even though I like this movie, Hellraiser 2, Hellbound, it kind of immediately starts losing itself a little bit, and it becomes more fantastical. It becomes more something akin to like Nightbreed, which is another, Clive Barker story and movie, or Lord of Illusions. It just becomes more like that, and I always kind of missed the simplicity of it. So when they were announced that they were doing a Hellraiser, where they were going to basically be rebooting the entire franchise, doing away with all of the awful sequels, which I also have. I have this for some reason. I think I bought it impulsively. I don't even think I've watched most of these. I've only watched maybe a handful of them over the years. There's just not my go-to series, and they get really bad. And like I said, they kind of miss the point, what I think is the point of the original. It loses it very quickly, but it loses it super quick, and it never recovers. So I was hoping when they came back to this that it would be kind of going back to that. But as with so many movies or so many reboots and stuff like that, that try to recapture something or do a sequel 30 years after the fact, it becomes kind of this big meta experience where it is a reboot. It is a reboot, but it also knows that you've probably seen the other movies. And it kind of folds that into it. It tries to give you a little something if you're a fan of the franchise. Not just a fan of the original, but it's trying to seed kind of ideas, thoughts, little Easter eggs about all of the movies. So coming to the new one, I felt very disappointed. I didn't really have expectations, I would say, for it. I think David Bruckner is an okay director. He directed The Night House and The Ritual, both movies which I find to be varying degrees of okay. Like, none of them are bad, but there's something kind of flat and uncinematic about his directorial style that I just don't think he has a good eye. I don't really know how else to put it. Just there's something about it that just feels flat. They feel like they're made for TV movies, and this also feels that way. There's something about digital photography that really robs movies like this of texture. And so they can do all this, and so everything just looks slick and clean, where something like this should look kind of grungy and gross a lot of the times, and I just don't ever feel like it really got there. They try. I think the production design at times is okay, but it also feels kind of anonymous. It doesn't feel very specific. It doesn't even really feel very Hellraiser, in my opinion, a lot of the times. Because if you go back and watch the original Hellraiser, it's very, like, once you get into the Cenobite stuff, it's very simplistic, but it's also kind of nightmarish and provocative and kind of disturbing, and not in the ways where they try to do it in this one. In this one, they try to make it like kind of, there's nothing subconsciously disturbing about it. It's just like, oh, isn't that gross? Isn't that icky? It just feels overly pronounced in a weird way, because now when they have like the Cenobites in this one, they're not like in BDSM kind of traditional like leather gear. There was something about that in the old ones that I think that just worked really well, because it didn't overstate itself, and you kind of understood the subtext of what those characters, what the Cenobites represented, because of, if you're familiar at all with kind of kink or BDSM culture, or, people hanging by hooks and shit like that. Like, you kind of understood that on some sort of like subtextual level. In your subconscious, you kind of took that in, and you knew that the Cenobites were about kind of mixing pain with pleasure, but erring more on the side of pain. Because most people don't really investigate pain to that degree. Everybody has a threshold, a cutoff point, but what if you didn't have that threshold and you wouldn't die? So that's kind of what they do. And now it's just very like overt. It's kind of like almost over the top in a way that I found a little obnoxious. Now, that could be my kind of unfamiliar nature with the broader franchise. Like, I've watched a few of those other ones past the first two, but I don't really remember them very much, and I don't find them very distinct. They all kind of just like kind of blend together. So, there could be something there. Like I said, this has like a meta quality where I think it expects you to be more familiar with this franchise than maybe I think you should. I was hoping they would just go back to basics and tell a very basic, simple story, but it feels like really overdone, overwritten, and there's just one too many twists and turns. And then by the end of it, you're just kind of confused about what the fuck you were supposed to be getting out of this, or what their characters were supposed to be doing, what the journey was for the characters. It just doesn't really hit it home. It's all, it's all just kind of stupid and becomes very contrived at some point. At some point, you just start not understanding what the rules are, because it's able to kind of shift and change the rules as necessary, as needed for the plot. So there's not a lot of tension built for any of this stuff. And especially when it comes to the Cenobites, which are used very sparingly in the original film, and that's what makes them impactful. In this, they're just kind of they're movie monsters. They're movie monsters, and they're also really dumb and very easily tricked, which I found kind of shocking. It kind of just completely removes their power in a weird way, what makes them effective as characters. And I think that over design just comes off as like corny at some point. It just looks like people in monster suits. And it just really misses something. So Jamie Clayton steps in as Pinhead, the priest, as if you were to read the Hellbound Heart or later stories that include Pinhead, he's called the priest. So they're referencing Clive Barker's other stories by calling him that in this. And it's just kind of whatever. I don't like it's not a memorable performance. This person's speaking, it seems like kind of in their own voice to one degree or another. I know there's like a little bit of modulation going on, a little bit of fuckery. I think some of that might even be in post.
What is it you pray for? What is it you pray for?
But just not memorable. Like Doug Bradley, the original Pinhead, there's something about his stare. There's something about the way he holds himself. And there's something about that voice that really is provocative and effective.
Oh no, it is a means to summon us.
Who are you?
Explorers in the further regions of experience. Demons to some, angels to others.
It's memorable. And this, I watched this a few days ago. I'm already forgetting the movie. It's already leaving my mind. And, and that goes, and I watched the first hour of it twice because I fell asleep the first night I watched it. I fell asleep. I don't know what it is about these Hulu movies. The same thing happened to me with that movie Prey, which I also did not like at all. So you can check out that review. But yeah, so I fell asleep during the first hour. And then the next day I was like, well, I was kind of cool to it, but maybe I was tired. I started it kind of late. I was tired. I fell asleep. So I'll just restart. I'll start it over. So I watched the first hour twice. And honestly, it just got worse. I was more kind of irritated and disengaged with it the second time through the first hour. Because the characters are all just kind of odious. There's nothing good about them. There's nothing to... What's the word? I'm trying to think of the right way to put this. There's nothing there that feels like it's being undermined by the Cenobites. In the original one, you have kind of the nuclear family. You have Uncle Frank that's being undermined by Uncle Frank, and the Cenobites are undermining the notion of the nuclear family. And them, it's infected their life. This degeneracy, basically. And this one, they're already all pieces of shit. They're all kind of degenerates. They have the main character has a brother, Odessa Azion, which I don't think I've seen her in anything. She plays the character Riley. She has a brother that is kind of the most innocent character in the story. And, spoiler alert, he gets taken out fairly early on in the goings of stuff, and they use him as kind of a plot mechanic to drive things forward and give his sister something to try to figure out this. I got to figure out this mystery so I can bring my brother back to life, because sure, why not? And then it bookends with this other character played by Goran Viznek, the Voight, who is kind of the Uncle Frank stand-in, some very wealthy rich guy who was famous for collecting occult paraphernalia, and but he was, he's obviously trying to open the puzzle box so he can talk to the Cenobites and be granted his wishes, and obviously that backfires because you can't make a deal with with the Cenobites because they're kind of duplicitous in nature, and it's more of like, be careful what you wish for. Are you sure you want to do that? And it's just so dumb. And then even the stuff with the Cenobites, like talking to Riley at some point, it's all just felt like so dumb and contrived. It felt like middle of the pack Hellraiser stuff. It did not feel like they kind of properly kind of went back to the sentiment of the original and its roots. And that's what I was hoping for. So I ended up being very disappointed. And just the fact that it kind of looks the way it does, like it's just like this kind of flat, uninteresting visual aesthetic that I just couldn't get into. And I had just, I just watched the original Hellraiser a few nights before this one came out because I just wanted to kind of refresh myself with it, even though I've watched it pretty regularly, probably once a year, every 2 years during the Halloween season. But yeah, because that movie has a look. It has a look to it that is, and it's awesome. There's like a lot of good cinematography. There's a lot of good production design, a lot of great like lighting effects, etc. There is something deeply unsettling about the way that the original Hellraiser looks, and this one looks like an amusement park ride. It's like the Marvelification of the Hellraiser movies. And yeah, super disappointed. I don't know what the fuck people are talking about when they talk about how much they enjoyed it. I was wildly disappointed. Not a fan. Not a fan of it. It's not like, it's just, why even bother? Like, if this is what you're going to do with Hellraiser, if you're going to bring Hellraiser back and you just kind of make a stock middle of the road monster movie, I don't know. There's a lot of potential with the concept of Hellraiser. Actually, Hellraiser would make like a great anthology series. I don't know why that's never been done. Like, if since it's on Hulu, just make it a TV show. Like, make it a show. Make it an anthology series. And every episode, it's another dalliance with the Cenobites. And you could actually, and they could be used more effectively. They could be more pronounced in that way. And you could tell a lot of great stories. A lot of interesting stuff you could do. But no, that's not what they're going to do. They're probably going to crank out a few more, because I know a lot of people have watched this. This has been, reviewed pretty well, even if it's full of caveats. People are like, well, it's good. It's like good for a Hellraiser movie. So it's good, right? So we'll give it a pass. Not me. Well, yeah, I don't really have much else to say about it. I was just kind of very underwhelmed. I'm already forgetting about it. I don't imagine I'll ever watch it again. There's no reason to. I'll just go back and watch the original. Just watch Hellraiser. Hell, sometimes I'll get crazy and watch Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. It's a fun movie. It's not as good as the first one, but it's fun. It's fun enough. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on ZooBox. Goodbye.